Most people think their circle shrinks because they're evolving, and they're not wrong. Growth does change who's around you, but the deeper reason your circle narrows is structural. As your priorities, focus, and discipline shift, your availability changes. And once availability changes, access changes too. Most social environments are built around availability. Birthdays, cookouts, holidays, last-minute plans, random spending, emotional gatherings. None of these are dangerous alone, but when your life becomes structured, constant celebration starts to feel like constant disruption. So you begin declining more. Not emotionally, logistically. This is why episode 10, The Calendar Trap, matters. Because when you escape the trap, your social presence changes. You stop attending everything. You stop spending automatically. You stop celebrating on demand. You stop showing up just because it's expected. And the moment that happens, your circle starts to narrow. Not because you hate people, but because your structure can't support constant interruption anymore. When you start focusing, you become less available. When you start planning long term, you stop living day to day. When you start building discipline, you stop moving impulsively. And most relationships are built on impulsive access. For example, if your focus is eliminating debt, your availability naturally changes. You're not interested in trips. You're not interested in random spending. You're not interested in last-minute plans that require money you've already assigned elsewhere. Because every dollar has direction now. Every decision has consequence now. So it's not that you don't want experiences. You just can't prioritize them while you're prioritizing financial stability. And that shift in focus automatically reduces access. Which ties directly back to the calendar trap. Because once you escape it, you're no longer financially available for every birthday, trip, holiday, or gathering. Not because you don't care, but because your money is finally working toward freedom, not celebration. That's why the shift feels sudden. You don't announce anything. You don't cut anyone off. You naturally move differently. This doesn't mean you start walking around cutting people off. You don't force distance. You don't announce separation. You don't decide one day to isolate yourself. It happens naturally when your focus changes. Because the more intentional you become, the less available you are for randomness. And people feel that shift. They may not say it directly, but they feel the distance. Because your absence forces them to notice something uncomfortable. You're prioritizing differently. It's not that you think you're better, it's that your time is finally organized, your money is finally directed, your focus is finally protected. And protection always looks like distance to people who live without structure. Sometimes the shift shows up in simple ways. You talk to certain friends every day, because you're gaming every day. 5, 10 hours at a time. Headsets on. Laughing. Competing. Escaping. So communication feels constant, but it isn't built on alignment, it's built on shared activity. You speak to some friends daily and because you're always outside. Clubs, restaurants, link-ups, weekend plans. So the conversations stay active because the lifestyle stays active. You talk to others every day because both of you are deep in social media, following viral moments, debating trending topics, laughing at the same content. But once you stop living online, those conversations slow down too. Same with sports. Daily debates, game reactions, highlight discussions. But when your time gets reallocated, even that rhythm changes. Even family communication shifts. When both of you are struggling financially, you speak more often. Shared stress creates shared conversation. Families that are struggling, communication is often built on problem solving, venting, bills and stress, survival talk, updates about hardship. So conversation frequency increases because stress creates a need to talk. There's always something to figure out, something to complain about, something to survive. That becomes the bond. Not intentionally, but structurally. But once your structure starts changing, those daily exchanges begin to soften. Not because you don't care, not because you feel above anyone, but because you're no longer operating from that same place of struggle. Your focus shifts toward fixing your situation. You start thinking about debt freedom, stability, long-term planning, time ownership, system building. You're not calling to vent, you're working to solve. You're not discussing problems daily, you're building solutions quietly. So communication reduces, not out of distance, out of difference. And it's important to say this clearly. This isn't about leaving family behind. You can't force someone else's mindset to change. You can't restructure someone else's priorities. All you can do is adjust your own structure. So while they may still bond through shared struggle, you're bonding with your future through discipline. So instead of looking at your circle emotionally, analyze it structurally. Look at how your relationships are built. If you have a friend that only contacts you to gossip, what happens when you're no longer entertaining gossip? If you have a friend that only bonds through drinks, clubs, or spending, what happens when you stop participating in those environments? Do you think communication continues at the same frequency? At first, probably, but pay attention to the intent. Sometimes the contact isn't to maintain connection. It's to pull you back into the version of yourself they connected with. And when that version of you no longer responds, communication naturally slows. Not because of conflict, because the activity that sustained the relationship is no longer active. And sometimes, people take offense to that change. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your shift forces them to confront their own position. Your discipline can feel like distance. Your focus can feel like rejection, even when that isn't your intention. But that's okay. You're not responsible for how people interpret your growth. You're responsible for maintaining your structure. You even see this at work. Co-workers bond heavily because they're in the same position. Same complaints, same pay level, same frustrations. So conversation feels strong. But when one person gets promoted, or changes departments, or leaves the job entirely, communication fades. Not out of hostility, out of situational separation. Because many relationships aren't built on deep alignment. They're built on shared environments, shared routines, shared access points. So when your routines change, your environments change. And when your environments change, your communication patterns change too. That's why your circle narrows without you cutting anyone off. You simply stop entertaining what no longer aligns with your structure. And over time, the people connected to those spaces contact you less on their own. But what's just as important is recognizing the ones who remain. Because not everyone fades when your structure changes. Some people adjust. Some people respect your focus. Some people connect with you without needing access to your old routines. They don't require clubs, spending, gossip, or constant availability to maintain connection. The bond holds even when the activities don't. So your circle doesn't just shrink, it refines. What leaves was tied to environment. What stays is tied to foundation. Growth doesn't remove people. It reveals who was built for where you're going.